Salams from the People's Dispatch Studios in New Delhi. I'm Siddhantani and you're watching Daily Debrief. Now, by and large, on the show so far, we've talked about several of the fallouts of the pandemic and how governments have handled them in various nations. But with all the talk of the newest labeled variant of the virus we know as COVID-19, it made sense to bring back NewsClick's Prabir Pukayasa, someone who has studied and written consistently on the subject right from the first outbreak, and also has shared his views with us in the past. Prabir, quite simply and as broadly as you want to make it, where are we at?
Well, early days yet. As you know, the Delta variant took over from all other variants and has replaced 99% of the case load that we have today.
Right.
So alpha, beta, mu, all of this have gone. And what you see is Delta. At this point, if you look at the preliminary data, and of course we have data from South Africa in terms of numbers, particularly the one particular region of South Africa, it's about almost 30,000 cases, and we seem to see that it has replaced Delta already there as the dominant variant. And if you look at other countries, and again we have data now from different sources, and Trevor Bedford, he studies all of this in great detail. He's somebody who knows his numbers and also knows that how genetic variations are to be traced. We've considered one of the world's leading experts on that, runs a platform called NextStrain that traces the genomic lineages of viruses, including, of course, this particular virus. And he has compared different countries, in this case, Germany, UK, US, and South Africa, were very different infection totals. But what he shows, the reproduction rate seems to be almost identical in all the four countries, which would seem to show that this variant is certainly more transmissible than Delta, which itself was more transmissible than other variants. So therefore, looking at it, the direction seems to be higher transmissibility of Omicron, therefore replacing slowly other variants, particularly the Delta, which is the dominant one at the moment. And what Dr. Bedford points out, and that's a very interesting observation, that even if the total numbers are very different, you find that the rate of reproduction of the infections seem to be almost of the same nature, almost the same order, which would seem to indicate this is a characteristic of the virus itself, this particular variant itself. So looking at it, the UK has predicted in 4 to 6 weeks, this will emerge as the dominant variant in UK as well. In India, the figures are much lower, and so also in many other countries. But we
Which I suppose are determined by other variables like testing, for example.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say. That's really it could be an artifact of testing, because we are testing less than 0.2% of our infections. Well, UK has probably a much higher number of tests that they are performing. And South Africa, for obvious reasons, have been very good in this. And in fact, you should congratulate the South African doctors and the genomic experts who have done this exercise, and they've been punished for it, for immediately being sanctioned, no flights from South Africa. So we have said, well, you know, we find something which is new. We warn the world, and this is the reward we get.
So which obviously leads us quite directly to the next question, which is a question of inequity, whether it comes to a question of testing even, because in some countries, of course, it's free, like the UK, for example, tests are being given out to anyone that asks for a test, whereas even in India, you have to, at least in reality, pay for it. But also in terms of certain data that you have about booster doses in some countries and how that relates to global data.
You see, we have been talking about vaccine inequity for quite some time. And I think the most glaring instance of vaccine inequity is not simply the numbers vaccinated or percentage numbers vaccinated, which we know in a lot of countries is about 70% of the target population, while in most countries in Africa, in fact, if you average Africa in total, it comes to something like 2 to 3%. So that's a glaring inequity. But if we see now what inequity or inequality, if you will, is more sharp if you look at even simple things like booster doses in the United States and UK put together is more than the total number of vaccinated doses given in Africa. Now that is the disparity we're living with. Third dose being given for the target population is more than the actual vaccine for the entire continent. And US and UK put together, we're talking the booster doses, would be what? hardly a fraction of the population of African continent. It's 1.3 billion roughly over there, 1.25 billion, as against 300
300 million
million
or so.
in the US and about 60 million in the UK.
Yeah.
So you're really talking of a small fraction, which is getting doses in excess of the third dose, in excess of what the entire continent of Africa is getting. And the point here is not that it is just inequitable. It also the fact that if you don't do this, if you do not vaccinate, what you are likely to see is the growth of more new variants.
Absolutely.
Of course, it's very good for the pharmaceutical companies who are now saying we'll charge, even AstraZeneca has said, we're not going to make profits out of our vaccines. Moderna and Pfizer, as you know, from the beginning have said this is profits for business for us, so we are not going to talk about how people should pay for it. We need the money. And Pfizer and Moderna never made any profits earlier. The biggest killing they're making is one issue. But Pfizer, this has been their huge money spinner, and it is really a very, very significant part of their profits this year, and which they would love to have the pandemic continue forever. So the fact that we are not dampening down the whole pandemic using vaccines, one consequence of this is some companies make money while others die. And this is preventable. The worst part of it, it's preventable. Knowledge can be shared, technology can be shared, we can replicate this so that we can give booster doses to rich countries and provide basic vaccines to all countries, all people who need it. This is the way the world should go. But what is in the interest of people and what's in the interest of capital is very different. And this is the primary example of this.
Absolutely. And I think something that also, the markets have tended to reflect over the course of the pandemic in sort of multiple industries and things like that, with companies making record profits, tech, for example, and all of these things and how it comes together. Thanks very much, Prabir, for that. But we're moving on to our next story now. At least 6 people have been killed and countless others injured during a partial collapse of a warehouse in Illinois on the night of December 10. So the nature of the rescue mission there has changed since then, indicating that officials get a sense there are no more survivors, unfortunately. Anish has been following this quite tragic story. Anish, you were saying earlier there are lots of questions that come up from how this entire episode unfolded, the messages that have now been shared on social media. What are the ones that stand out for you?
I think the first question that everybody is still asking is, why were these workers still working at the time when a tornado was imminent, and they had prior knowledge that the state and the district, or like the county as they say, will be affected. They still kept the workers in the warehouse, and not just that, they were also going through a shift change in the middle of a tornado. Right. Now, Amazon's justification is that they got the tornado alert at too late, and it was too late to evacuate. And but the tornado alert as such came at about 8:06 p.m. But the tornado warning or watch that was given since at least 5 p.m. in the evening. Right. So they had hours to prepare even if it's not like a single evacuation.
Maybe do a drill.
Do a drill, make sure that this shelter to have like something. Some amount of preparation that would not have led to loss of lives. And obviously at some point, like, not have a shift change during a tornado. This is like basic things that anybody expects for them to have actually gone through, but they refused to do that. They did that to pretty much keep the sales up, their delivery target, to meet their delivery targets, which is kind of absurd. But at the same time, this is something that they're very tight-lipped about. The message that you said, which very heartbreaking message, it completely haunts anybody who reads it, where the man talks about how Amazon is not letting them leave. Just like not that shortly before the tornado actually hit the warehouse, which was a good 20 minutes after the first tornado alert was given out in the county. It shows that there was a certain level of carelessness And even when you look at the specifics of how the safety plans were made out, how shelter was done, there was a group of people who went to a separate place in the warehouse, which was not very safe. They were very aware of the fact that it was not that safe to be there, but the warehouse manager somehow missed them out. Obviously, it saved a majority of the workers, but to say that just 6 lives were lost is also quite terrible. Yeah, it's just something you cannot justify in any meaningful way, because it's a huge warehouse and it was not something that they could not have prepared for.
Right. So, I guess the next question from this would be, it is, after all, the most litigious country in the world or society in the world. I'm assuming some action will follow. What kind of responsibility or accountability will Amazon hold for this?
It's very difficult to say, because right now there is an OSHA. OSHA is basically their building guidelines of how safe a building is, basically workplace safety, and how prepared it is for any kind of disasters to come. Now, so there will be an OSHA guidelines hearing at the local level to see
whether or not
they were prepared, or they had planned anything for that matter, whether the building was up to the mark, up to the standards of what a warehouse should be, or a safe warehouse should be in case of a natural disaster. Now, the thing is that nobody is saying that a natural disaster could have been prevented by Amazon. But the point is that a lot of things are missing.
I would say not nobody. There are people saying that as well.
I mean,
sorry,
like it's always US, so you can never say. But anybody who's serious about the workers who died in this tragedy would not be making that statement. Obviously, they are concerned about the fact that there were no drills, no practices, no contingency plan, for that matter, on how to deal with an emergency. Forget a tornado drill. Tornadoes are very rare in that region, but a fire drill even is not something that is not something that the workers were trained in. And this is something that workers, many of them have actually come out in reports saying that they'd never had a decent fire drill. In fact, some have even said that they have had better ones when they were in school. So this shows that Amazon was really, because Amazon was more concerned about the time lost in doing those drills, in those safety operations, in those contingency plans, and how much loss that will be in meeting their targets. So it was, in a way, it's actually criminal. To say it is problematic is to put it mildly. So there were no plans whatsoever to deal with any kind of catastrophic, exactly, or any workplace emergency, And this is something we have seen with Amazon in the past. Even forget about workplace safety, we are talking about general standards of working in these warehouses. We have heard of reports where Amazon have banned telephones for workers inside warehouses, fearing that even like checking a message would be time lost. Exactly. Bathroom breaks, which has been a major revelation in the recent years. And so many more other things that we often take for granted when it comes to workplace, in a workplace environment, but it just wasn't afforded to many of them, thousands of them. And so this is pretty much an extension of that. So while there will be that OSHA hearings, we are not sure what kind of measures will be put on them. We saw during the COVID-19 pandemic that there was a lawsuit that actually made them pay about $500,000 in fines because they did not warn their workers about an infection spread in the warehouses. So this is the sort of company that really just does not compromise with pretty much anything, even if it's life-threatening to its own workers. So we are not sure. Even $500,000 for a company that huge is, it's not even spending change. It's basically nothing for them. And that barely affects their ethics, their operations, behavior, everything. So we are not very sure how far it will go. Something like this should ideally be a major national controversy. It is in many ways because workers are taking this seriously. But if you look at the manner in which the media gives attention to it, it's quite limited. It's not as much as it is supposed to be, because at any rate, it is not just a natural disaster. Obviously, the city as a whole has really suffered. Illinois itself has seen dozens of deaths due to the tornado, and for various reasons. But 6 people dying in a warehouse because the warehouse refused to let them leave to a better shelter, is an industrial disaster in many ways. And to not be treated it as such is going to have its own kind of implications, not just legally or in other litigations, but also in how it is going to be treated by workers' movements and trade unions and so on.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're sort of sticking with the theme of the United States and law and legality in a sense. U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin has decided against disciplining any members of the U.S. military for an August drone strike in Kabul, the capital of Afghanistan, that killed 10 civilians, including 7 children. The New York Times first reported this story, and then several U.S. news outlets have followed up on these reports on Monday. An internal Pentagon review concluded last month that the August 29 bombing in the Afghan capital did not violate the laws of war and was not caused by misconduct or criminal negligence. PD's Abdul has been following these reports. I spoke to him earlier on the phone. Here's what he had to say.
Abdul, first up, what specifics about this case can you give us beyond, of course, knowing now that the US government is not likely to hold anyone individually responsible for the deaths of these 10 civilians?
I think this is yet another example of what we call the US impunity. Whatever US does, there is no way to kind of get hold of it and basically get a justice for the victims. The 10 people who were killed in the drone strike on August 29th this year, during the evacuation, that chaotic evacuation from Afghanistan, shows that how, first of all, US tried to portray them as the operatives of the terrorist organization ISIS Khorasan. And when the facts came out and it became obvious that these are not terrorists, these are common citizens who have been killed, and there are innocent people, they tried to wash their hands off by saying that this is a mistake and so on and so forth. The investigation report which came last month, it says that this was a mistake, honest mistake, and they were acting, the US personnel who were responsible for the drone strike, they were acting in self-defense and so on and so forth. Of course, none of these are true. The truth of the matter is that 10 people were killed because of the occupation, because of the paranoia with which the US operated in Afghanistan. And I think, and it seems it has come to that point that it's the arrogance of the US that they're saying they will not take any action no matter what the repercussions are. And that basically is the issue which is the matter of concern, that how every time US does something and it gets away with it. That is the issue, which basically is at the gist of this particular incident.
So in this case where it is so difficult, and you pointed out very clearly how difficult it is to sort of get someone to be accountable for this, what kind of redressal mechanism do the victims have in these kind of cases?
We have seen in the previous examples we have from, say, people from Yemen, filing cases in different human rights tribunals and the courts. Even the US court, in fact, some human rights groups can basically work on behalf of them and file a case in the United States, as it has happened in Yemen and in other places.
Right.
We don't know how long that will stretch, and there is no way of finding out whether the US courts will necessarily give a verdict favorable to the victims. That is one. The second thing, of course, the other things, that international treaties under which the US can be held accountable, I think most of those treaties US is not part of. For example, US is not part of the US is not a part of the International Court of International Criminal Court, and whenever they unilaterally try to take some action on these, this is obviously a war crime. Whenever they try to do something, US uses its military and economic might, puts sanction, and therefore nothing moves. We have seen it in the cases of Afghanistan earlier, and it has happened during the cases in Iraq as well.
Right.
So the only thing which US is talking about, of course, they have said, denied completely that there will be any action against the people responsible, but they're willing to apparently take these people out of Afghanistan, the remaining members of the family,
right,
and compensate them economically in whatever. The details of that thing is not very clear.
Very clear.
So right now, it seems that the only way is some initiatives from the human rights groups to file a case in the US. That is the only way out.
All right. Thanks so much for that, Abdul.
All right, that's all we have on the show for today. For more details on this and all the stories that People's Dispatch have been covering over the course of this week or ever actually, you can visit our website peoplesdispatch.org and follow us on all the regular social media platforms. Thanks for watching. We'll be back same time, same place tomorrow.